Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at something kind of different.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Buddhist teachings on self-esteem, virtue, and right speech.
Okay.
All connected to this idea, this intriguing idea of the 5 precepts.
Right.
And we're going to be diving deep into excerpts from a book called Pasted Text.
Okay.
And it's really wild how it presents the Buddha, almost as a therapist.
Interesting.
And his teachings as a prescription for, like, a healthier mind.
Yeah.
That's like Buddhism.
It's like self-help.
Centuries ahead of its time.
It really is fascinating how this perspective reframes Buddhism as a practical toolkit for, like, boosting mental and emotional well-being rather than just a set of beliefs or rituals.
Right. And it kind of got me thinking, like, what if we approached these ancient teachings as a way to, like, address some of our very modern struggles, like low self-esteem or negative communication patterns? It's like, could these age-old wisdom actually offer some solutions for us today?
The text seems to suggest just that. And it even goes beyond the typical focus on meditation.
Right.
While meditation is undoubtedly important, the source argues that it might not be enough to completely heal the underlying issues that cause our struggles.
Okay.
It's like meditation calms the surface, but we need something more to, like, dig deeper and address the root causes.
That makes total sense. Have you ever felt like you're meditating consistently, but still wrestling with the same old issues underneath?
Absolutely. And that's where the 5 precepts come in. They're presented as a key element in Buddhist practice, yet they're often overlooked, especially in modern interpretations.
So let's unpack these 5 precepts. What are they exactly, and how do they relate to self-esteem?
The text describes the 5 precepts as a powerful antidote to 2 major obstacles to self-esteem: regret and denial.
Okay.
Think about how often we get stuck in these cycles of regretting past actions or denying responsibility for our choices. It can be incredibly draining and damaging to our sense of self-worth.
Oh, 100%. I think everyone listening can relate to that, feeling trapped in those cycles.
Exactly. And the precepts offer a way to break free. They're pretty straightforward. No killing, no stealing, no harmful sexual conduct, no lying or intoxicants.
Okay.
But their power lies in understanding how they work on a deeper level.
Okay, so it's more than just following the rules. There's a deeper meaning behind each precept, and the text actually uses some really interesting words to describe them. Practical, clear-cut, humane, and respectable. I'm curious to hear more about how those qualities play into this whole self-esteem equation.
Yeah, let's start with practical. The precepts are very easy to understand and apply in our daily lives. No complex rituals or obscure philosophies. This simplicity makes them very accessible and less daunting.
Right, so it's not like we have to decipher some ancient text or something like that. The guidance is pretty straightforward.
Precisely, and that leads us to clear-cut. There's no room for gray areas or rationalizing bad behavior. You either did it or you didn't know, justifying it away. And this clarity can be incredibly helpful in today's world, where we're constantly bombarded with information and tempted to make excuses for ourselves. The precepts offer a firm foundation for honesty and self-awareness.
That's an interesting point. It is so easy to get caught up in justifications, but that often just leads to more denial and prevents us from taking responsibility for our actions.
Exactly. And then there's humane. This quality is rooted in the Buddhist principle of metta, which means loving kindness. It's about cultivating an attitude of compassion towards ourselves and others, aligning our actions with our intentions. When we act from a place of loving kindness, it naturally fosters self-respect and respect for others.
I see. So it's like by treating ourselves and others with kindness and compassion, that naturally elevates our own sense of self-worth.
Absolutely. And finally, respectable. The text talks about following in the footsteps of noble ones who have achieved genuine happiness through ethical living.
Okay.
It implies that by adhering to these precepts, we're aligning ourselves with a higher standard of being.
That's a really powerful idea. It's like instead of just avoiding negative consequences, we're aiming for a way of life that's truly worthy of admiration and respect, which in turn boosts our own self-esteem.
Exactly. And you know, the text also highlights how living by these precepts can lead to a greater sense of inner peace and harmony.
Okay.
By eliminating harmful actions from our lives, we reduce those feelings of guilt, regret, and shame, all those things that can really weigh us down.
It's like clearing out the mental clutter and creating more space for positive emotions and a sense of well-being.
And this brings us to an interesting point. The text also emphasizes the importance of community in supporting this kind of ethical living. It suggests that being part of a group that values these principles creates a supportive environment for personal growth.
That makes a lot of sense. We've all heard that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if we surround ourselves with people who prioritize honesty, kindness, and self-control, it becomes easier to embody those values ourselves.
Precisely. It's like having a built-in support system that reinforces our commitment to these principles. And it's not just about finding people who are already perfect at all this, but seeking out individuals who are genuinely striving to live ethically and communicate mindfully.
It's about creating a culture of support and accountability where we can learn from each other, encourage each other, and grow together. And I think that's a perfect segue into the next topic that the text delves into, which is right speech.
Yes.
Because our communication patterns play a huge role in shaping our relationships and the overall atmosphere of our social circles.
Yes, and it's not just about being polite or avoiding gossip. The text actually suggests that mastering our speech is a powerful way to train our minds. It even claims that if you can't control your mouth, there's no way you can hope to control your mind.
Wow, that's a bold statement. It kind of makes you stop and think about how much we say without really thinking right. I'm curious to hear more about this connection between controlling our speech and controlling our minds. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
The idea is that by becoming more aware of our speech patterns, why we say things, what motivates us to speak, we gain deeper insights into our own thought processes. It's like using our words as a window into our minds, revealing the underlying motivations and intentions that drive our behavior.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about the words themselves, but the thoughts and emotions that are fueling them. By paying attention to what we say, we can start to understand our own minds better.
Exactly. And then by practicing right speech, we can actually start to filter out harmful or unproductive thoughts before they even manifest as words.
It's like training ourselves to catch those negative thought patterns before they escalate and create negativity in our lives and relationships. But what exactly does right speech look like in practice?
The text outlines 4 types of harmful speech that we should avoid: lies, divisive language, harsh words, and pointless chatter.
Okay.
It also emphasizes the importance of intent, meaning we should be mindful of the motivation behind our words. So it's not just about what we say, but why we say it. It adds a whole new layer of complexity and awareness to our communication.
I was trying to see how challenging this can be. It's like we're constantly evaluating our own intentions and making sure our words are aligned with kindness, honesty, and understanding. And that leads me to another point. How do we balance being mindful of our speech with still being able to enjoy casual conversations and humor?
Right.
It seems like avoiding all pointless chatter could make life pretty boring.
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what makes this whole concept of right speech so intriguing. It's not about becoming silent or overly serious, but about finding a balance between spontaneity and mindfulness. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive. It's interesting how the pasted text actually encourages finding that balance between mindfulness and enjoying life. It emphasizes that right speech isn't about suppressing our personalities or becoming overly serious, but about being conscious creators of our communication.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's about making intentional choices rather than just reacting on autopilot.
Exactly. And the text offers some really helpful guidelines for cultivating this kind of mindful communication, like pausing before we speak, considering the impact of our words, and choosing to speak in ways that promote understanding and connection.
So it's like taking a breath, checking in with ourselves and asking, what's my intention here? Is what I'm about to say going to contribute to something positive or just add more noise to the world?
Precisely. And it's interesting how this idea of intention connects back to the 5 precepts we discussed earlier. The precepts provide a foundation for ethical action, while right speech extends that ethical awareness to our communication.
It's like the precepts create a framework for living in alignment with our values. And right speech helps us translate those values into our interactions with others.
Exactly. And the text suggests that this alignment between our actions and our words is essential for cultivating genuine self-esteem. When we act and speak in ways that are congruent with our values, it creates a sense of inner harmony and authenticity.
It's like we're walking our talk, becoming living embodiments of the principles we believe in. And that kind of integrity can be incredibly empowering.
Absolutely. And it can also have a ripple effect on those around us. When we communicate with honesty, kindness, and mindfulness, it invites others to do the same. It creates a space where genuine connection and understanding can flourish.
It's like setting a tone, creating a vibration that resonates outwards and influences the way others interact with us and with each other. Which reminds me of another point we touched upon earlier, the importance of community in supporting this kind of ethical living and communication. But I'm curious, what about those of us who aren't part of a formal Buddhist community? How can we create those supportive environments in our everyday lives?
That's a really important question. It's like, how do we translate this ancient wisdom into actionable steps for modern living? I think the key is to be proactive in curating our social circles and the environments we inhabit, both online and offline. We can choose to surround ourselves with people who inspire us to be our best selves.
It's like being mindful of the company we keep, seeking out friendships and relationships that align with our values. It's about creating spaces, whether physical or virtual, where honesty, kindness, and meaningful conversation are prioritized.
Exactly. And it's not just about finding people who are already perfect at all of this. Instead, it's about seeking out individuals who are genuinely striving to live ethically and communicate mindfully, people who are on a similar journey of self-improvement.
Because ultimately, it's about creating a culture of support and accountability where we can learn from each other, encourage each other, and grow together.
You know, this reminds me of a story. A friend of mine was struggling with negative self-talk, and she was finding it hard to break free from those patterns. She decided to join a meditation group, not necessarily because she was interested in Buddhism, but because she was drawn to the community's emphasis on mindfulness and compassion.
I love that. So it wasn't about adopting a whole new belief system, but about finding a space where her values were supported and nurtured.
Exactly. And she found that being surrounded by people who were actively practicing mindfulness and kindness helped her become more aware of her own negative thought patterns and to start shifting them.
It's like having a mirror that reflects back the best version of ourselves, reminding us of our potential and inspiring us to keep striving.
Right. And over time, she found that not only did her self-talk improve, but her relationships also became more fulfilling because she was communicating more mindfully and compassionately.
That's such a beautiful example of how finding the right environment can really make a difference in our personal growth. It's like creating a positive feedback loop where our environment reinforces our values and our values shape our environment.
And you know, it's important to remember that this isn't about becoming some sort of moral perfectionist or isolating ourselves from anyone who doesn't perfectly align with our ideals. It's about finding a balance between holding ourselves to high standards while also being compassionate and understanding towards others.
It's about creating a space for growth and transformation, both for ourselves and for those around us. And that brings us back to the power of right speech.
Yes, because as we were saying earlier, the way we communicate has a ripple effect, impacting not only our own well-being, but also the well-being of others. It's like we're constantly creating our social reality through our words and interactions.
So it's not just about avoiding negative speech, but actively cultivating positive and meaningful communication, using our words to build bridges, to inspire, to comfort, to share wisdom and humor in ways that uplift and connect. And that brings us to a really interesting point that the pasted text makes about humor and right speech.
Right. The text challenges us to find humor that aligns with these ethical principles. To be funny without resorting to harmful forms of speech like sarcasm or stereotypes.
Yeah, this is something I personally struggle with. So much of humor, especially these days, relies on sarcasm or making fun of someone or something. It's like, can we really be funny without poking fun at someone or something? Can humor be both lighthearted and mindful?
You know, I think that's where the real challenge and opportunity lie. The pasted text seems to suggest that true humor comes from a place of wisdom and compassion, from seeing the irony and absurdity of life itself, without needing to punch down or rely on cheap shots.
So it's about finding the humor in the everyday, in the unexpected, in the shared human experience. It's about laughing with people, not at them. Makes me think about some comedians I admire who manage to be hilarious without resorting to mean-spirited jokes or putting others down.
Exactly. And you know, it's not always easy to find that balance. Sometimes we might slip up and say something that we later regret. But the key is to keep practicing, to keep striving to align our humor with our values.
It's like any skill. The more we practice, the better we get at it. But I have to admit, I'm still struggling with this idea of pointless chatter. Isn't some level of casual conversation important for building rapport and connection? It feels like if we're constantly filtering our words, we might become too self-conscious and lose that sense of spontaneity.
That's a really insightful point. I think the key here is discernment. It's not about eliminating all casual conversation, but about being aware of when our chatter might be veering into negativity, gossip, or just mindless noise.
So it's about being mindful of the intention behind our words.
Right.
Even in casual conversation, if we're just gossiping or complaining, it might be time to shift the conversation to something more positive and uplifting.
Exactly. And sometimes silence can be just as powerful as words. There's a beauty in simply being present with someone, listening attentively, and allowing space for connection without the need for constant chatter.
That's a beautiful point. Like recognizing that true connection often happens in those moments of shared silence, where we can just be with each other without the need to fill the space with words.
And, the text suggests that this kind of mindful communication, including the use of silence, can actually deepen our relationships and create a more harmonious social environment.
Because when we're truly present with each other, we're able to listen more deeply, understand each other better, and offer genuine support and compassion. It's like creating a space where true intimacy and connection can flourish.
And that brings us back to the potential benefits of practicing right speech as a whole. The text highlights how mindful communication can lead to improved relationships, a greater sense of personal power, and a more peaceful and fulfilling way of being in the world.
That's a ripple effect, where our words create waves of positive energy that extend outwards, impacting not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. But I'm curious, how do we measure the impact of something as subtle as right speech? It's not like we can track our words and see how they affect people's lives, right?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what makes this practice so challenging and so rewarding. It's not about seeking external validation or measurable results, but about cultivating an inner awareness of the impact our words have on ourselves and others.
So it's about trusting that by making conscious choices in our communication, we're creating positive change, even if we can't always see the immediate effects.
Exactly. And sometimes the most profound impact is the one we have on ourselves. When we practice right speech, we're essentially training our minds to be more mindful, compassionate, and understanding. And those qualities naturally ripple outwards into our relationships and interactions with the world.
It's like we're creating a more harmonious inner world, which then manifests as a more harmonious outer world.
And that brings us to a really intriguing concept that the pasted text explores. The idea that our words can actually shape our reality.
Okay.
It suggests that by choosing to speak in ways that are aligned with our values, we're essentially creating a more positive and fulfilling reality for ourselves.
That's a powerful idea. It's like we're not just passive observers of our lives, but active creators. And our words are some of the most powerful tools we have for shaping our experiences.
Exactly. And, this idea of creating our reality through our words isn't just some mystical concept. Think about how often we use affirmations or positive self-talk to shift our mindset or motivate ourselves.
That's true. When we repeat positive affirmations, we're essentially planting seeds in our subconscious mind, which can then influence our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Right. And the pasted text takes this idea a step further, suggesting that by consciously choosing to speak in ways that are aligned with our values, with kindness, honesty, and compassion, we're essentially creating a more positive and harmonious reality for ourselves and those around us.
It's like we're creating a ripple effect of positivity, starting with our own thoughts and words, and then extending outwards into our relationships and the world at large. It's a reminder that even small acts of kindness, of mindful speech, of choosing laughter over negativity can have a profound impact.
It's about recognizing the power of our words and using them to create a more beautiful and harmonious world. And I think that's a message worth taking to heart, both on and off the cushion. It's about integrating these principles into our everyday lives, making them a part of who we are and how we interact with the world.
It's about embracing the power of right speech as a path to personal transformation and collective healing. It's about choosing to use our words to build bridges, to spread joy, to create a world where kindness, compassion, and understanding prevail. But I'm curious, does the pasted text offer any specific techniques or practices for cultivating right speech?
It does, and we'll dive into those in part 3 of our deep dive.
So we've talked about like the what and the why of right speech. It's about aligning our communication with our values, creating a more positive reality, all that good stuff. But now I'm really curious about the how. Does the pasted text give us any practical tools for actually putting this into practice? Like how do we train ourselves to speak more mindfully?
It does, and it approaches it in a way that feels both simple and profound. One of the key techniques that it emphasizes is something called mindful listening.
Oh, interesting. I've heard about mindful listening in the context of meditation, but I'm curious to hear how it relates to right speech.
The text explains that truly listening to someone without interrupting or formulating our response in our heads is a powerful way to cultivate a greater awareness of our own thought patterns. It's like instead of just waiting for our turn to speak, we're actually paying attention to what the other person is saying, to their tone of voice, their body language, the emotions behind their words.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like by quieting our own mental chatter, we create space to truly hear and understand the other person. And that in itself can be a form of right speech, right?
Right.
Because we're communicating respect and attentiveness through our listening.
Exactly. And the text suggests that this practice of mindful listening can actually help us become more aware of our own internal reactions to what we're hearing. It's like by paying attention to how we're feeling as we listen, we can start to notice those habitual patterns of judgment, criticism, or defensiveness that often fuel negative speech.
That's so true. Sometimes I catch myself already formulating a rebuttal in my head before the other person has even finished speaking, which of course means I'm not really listening at all.
And the text highlights that those habitual reactions often stem from our own insecurities or unresolved issues. So mindful listening becomes a way to not only improve our communication, but also to gain deeper insights into ourselves.
It's like by paying attention to how we react to others, we can uncover these hidden patterns in our own thinking and behavior.
That's fascinating.
Wow.
So mindful listening is one technique. Are there any others that the pasted text recommends for cultivating right speech?
Another practice it emphasizes is the power of silence. And this might seem counterintuitive because we're talking about right speech, right? But the text suggests that sometimes the most powerful communication happens in those moments of silence. That resonates with me. Sometimes it feels like we're so afraid of silence that we fill every space with words, even if those words aren't adding anything meaningful to the conversation.
Exactly. And the text invites us to reconsider silence, not as an absence of communication, but as a space for reflection, for deeper listening, for allowing our words to carry more weight when we do choose to speak.
It's like that saying, speak only if it improves upon the silence.
Yeah.
It's not always easy, right? Especially in social situations where we feel this pressure to be witty or entertaining.
It definitely takes practice, but the text suggests that by consciously incorporating more silence into our conversations, we create a more mindful and intentional communication style.
I'm imagining it as creating a pause between stimulus and response. Instead of just reacting to what someone says, we take a moment to collect our thoughts, to check in with our intentions, and then choose our words more carefully.
Exactly. And that pause, that moment of silence, can make all the difference in how our communication is received. It can convey respect, thoughtfulness, and a willingness to truly listen.
This reminds me of a technique I've heard about called the 6-second pause. It's this idea that before responding to someone, especially in a heated or emotional situation, we should take a full 6 seconds to just breathe and gather our thoughts.
I love that. It's like creating a buffer zone between our emotions and our words, allowing us to respond from a place of greater clarity and intentionality. And it aligns perfectly with the principles of right speech.
It's like we're training ourselves to respond rather than react, to choose our words wisely, rather than letting our emotions dictate our communication.
Exactly. And the text also emphasizes the importance of speaking with kindness and compassion, even when we're disagreeing with someone or addressing a difficult topic.
That can be so challenging, especially in today's world, where it feels like everyone is so quick to judge and criticize. How do we stay true to our values of kindness and compassion when we're faced with negativity or aggression?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what makes right speech such a powerful practice. It's not about being passive or avoiding conflict, but about finding ways to communicate our truth with clarity and respect, even in challenging situations.
So it's about setting boundaries, asserting ourselves when necessary, but doing so in a way that doesn't escalate the situation or create more negativity.
Exactly. And the text offers some helpful guidelines for navigating these tricky situations. For example, it suggests using I statements to express our own feelings and needs without blaming or accusing the other person.
Okay, so instead of saying, "You're always so negative," we might say, "I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by the negativity right now. Can we shift the conversation to something more positive?"
Exactly. And the text also emphasizes the importance of active listening. Even when we disagree with what's being said, it's about making an effort to truly understand the other person's perspective, even if we don't agree with it.
Because sometimes just feeling heard and understood can de-escalate a situation and create space for a more productive dialogue.
Exactly. And, it's important to remember that practicing right speech isn't about becoming perfect or never making mistakes. It's about making a conscious effort to align our communication with our values, to speak in ways that promote understanding, connection, and well-being.
It's like any skill. It takes practice, patience, and a willingness to learn from our mistakes. But the rewards are well worth the effort. And I think this deep dive has offered some really valuable insights into how we can apply these ancient Buddhist teachings to our modern lives.
I completely agree. It's been a fascinating exploration of the power of right speech, the transformative potential of the 5 precepts, and the importance of creating supportive environments for ethical living. And it leaves us with a lot to ponder, doesn't it? How can we be more mindful of our speech? How can we create spaces in our lives where these values are nurtured and celebrated? How can we use our words to create a more harmonious and compassionate world?
These are questions definitely worth reflecting on, and I encourage you, our listeners, to continue this exploration. Look for opportunities to practice right speech in your daily interactions. Seek out communities or create your own spaces where ethical living is valued and supported. And remember, even small acts of kindness, of mindful speech, can have a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves.
It's about recognizing the power of our words and using them to create a world that reflects the values of compassion, understanding, and respect, a world where we can all thrive and flourish.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a moment to appreciate the wisdom of these ancient teachings and commit to bringing them to life in our own unique ways.
May our words and actions be a source of healing, connection, and positive transformation.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep seeking the wisdom that lies within and all around you.